There are some nights that don't feel dangerous at first. No warning signs, no dramatic setup, no reason to believe anything is wrong. Just a long drive, a quiet house, a normal babysitting job. And maybe that's what makes stories like these so disturbing, because in each of these cases, the people involved were doing something ordinary, something harmless, until they realized someone had already been watching them. These are 3 true horror stories about strangers who got a little too close and the people who barely got away. If you're alone right now, maybe keep a light on for this one, because the stories in this video aren't about ghosts, demons, or things hiding in the dark. They're about real people, the kind you could pass on the road or find standing outside your front door. And that's exactly why they're so hard to forget. Let's get into it. Last year, I was taking a solo road trip from Wisconsin to Montana. It was one of those drives that feels endless even before it begins. For the first hour or so, there were still towns, traffic lights, and the occasional gas station. But once I got farther out, it was mostly just empty road, open fields, forests, a few hills here and there, and almost nothing else. Because of how I had everything planned, I decided to do the drive through the night and into the next day instead of splitting it into 2 days and paying for a hotel. I knew it was going to be rough, but at the time, it felt worth it. I left around 7 p.m. Before I took off, I made sure everything was packed. My snacks and drinks were in the front seat. My phone was charged. My route was set. Everything felt normal. The first hour went by pretty easily, but after that, it turned into the kind of highway where you can drive for miles without seeing more than a few headlights. Every now and then, there'd be a gas station off the road, but not much else. A couple hours in, I still had plenty of gas left. Even so, I figured I should top off before getting deeper into the more rural stretch. Eventually, I found a station. It was small, almost weirdly small. Just 4 pumps, no other cars, no one around. The convenience store attached to it wasn't even open. I pulled up to one of the pumps, got out, and started filling my tank. But almost immediately, I noticed something was off. The gas was coming out painfully slow. It was taking nearly a minute just to pump a single gallon. So I just stood there, leaning against my car, waiting. Then I saw headlights coming down the road. A car passed the station, slowed down, then backed up. That alone felt strange. It reversed into the entrance and pulled up behind me at the next pump over. At first, I figured the driver had missed the entrance and just needed gas badly enough to turn around. I didn't think much of it. I kept facing my own pump and waited. I heard the driver's door open, then footsteps, then nothing. No pump being lifted, no gas starting, just silence. After a few seconds, I glanced over. The man was already staring at me. He was tall, wearing a gray flannel and black jeans. And when I looked at him, I realized he hadn't just happened to look over. He had already been watching me. I gave him that awkward kind of smile people give when they don't know what else to do, then nodded and looked away. For a few seconds after that, I could still feel him staring. Then finally, I heard him grab the pump and start filling his car. That made me feel a little better. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he was just weird. When I finished, I put the nozzle back, sealed my gas cap, and looked over one last time. He was staring again. There was something about his face that stuck with me. His eyes looked heavy, dull, almost exhausted. But at the same time, there was this alertness to him that didn't feel right. Like his body was tired, but his mind was fully awake. I got back in my car and left. For the next few hours, the drive got worse. At some point, it started raining. Then it started raining harder. By the time I'd been driving for about 5 hours, it was just after midnight, and I could feel myself wearing down. The rain made the road more exhausting, and no amount of snacks or energy drinks really helped. By around 1 a.m., I needed a break. My gas was getting low again too, so when I saw another station up ahead, I pulled in. It looked even more run down than the first one. Still, the lights were on, and I needed fuel. I filled up, then parked off to the side of the building. I checked the weather, looked up nearby towns. There weren't any. I was basically in the middle of nowhere. So I decided I'd take a quick nap, maybe 25 or 30 minutes, just enough to reset. I leaned my seat back and fell asleep. When I woke up, the rain was still hitting the roof. My alarm hadn't even gone off yet. I'd only been asleep for around 25 minutes. I sat up and looked through the windshield. There was a car at one of the pumps. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I leaned forward a little more, and my stomach dropped. It was the same car. Or at least, I was almost sure it was. The same one from the first gas station. The same man. Only now, I couldn't see him anywhere. He wasn't standing outside, he wasn't in the driver's seat. And this station was so small, there was nowhere else he could have been. That was the moment my whole body went cold. I didn't stop to think. I started the car, threw it in reverse, and looked into my mirror. And that's when I saw him. He was in my back seat, just sitting there, in the dark, looking right at me. For a second, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. It didn't feel real. It felt like the kind of image your brain creates in a nightmare. But I wasn't dreaming. I jerked forward, kicked my door open, and jumped out onto the pavement while the car was still in reverse. It started slowly rolling backward on its own. I ran, straight into the woods. I didn't even think. I just ran through the rain until I was far enough away to turn around. And then I watched my car keep rolling until it stopped. A second later, the headlights shifted, and that man drove away in my car. Just like that. He left me stranded at some isolated gas station in the middle of nowhere. Then it hit me. My phone was still in the dashboard. I just stood there in the rain for a moment, trying to understand what had happened. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then I looked back at the other car, the one he had arrived in. He had left it behind. I walked over to it and found the door unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. There were random groceries in the back seat, and somehow, by pure luck, there was a phone on the floor near the passenger seat. It was locked, but I was still able to call 911 from the lock screen. At the time, I figured the guy was just careless, maybe stupid, maybe panicked. But later, I found out that car wasn't his either. It was stolen, and everything inside belonged to someone else. Someone investigators believe he had already done something similar to before me. And according to them, he probably didn't hide in my back seat just to scare me. They think he was waiting for me to get back on the road, waiting until I was trapped, waiting until there was nowhere to run. They never found him. They never found my car. And sometimes I still think about how close I came to disappearing that night without anyone knowing what really happened. Because if I hadn't looked in that mirror when I did, I probably wouldn't have gotten out. This happened in the middle of January. I lived in a small house in a quiet wooded town about 45 minutes outside the city. It was the kind of area where homes were spread far apart, driveways were long, and at night, the trees made everything feel more isolated than it really was. That day, I had only worked a half shift, so I was planning to spend the evening at home. Around 7 p.m., a friend called and asked if I could pick him up because he was having car trouble. He also wanted to grab some food on the way home. It wasn't a big deal. I told him I'd head over. I grabbed my jacket, picked up my keys, and opened the front door, and immediately jumped. There was a man standing right there on my porch. Not at the edge of it, not on the steps, right in front of the door. Close enough that for a second, it felt like I had opened it into him. He wore a heavy coat and the lower half of his face was covered with a black neck gaiter. What threw me off wasn't just that he was there, it was that he didn't seem startled at all. I just opened the door in his face and he barely reacted. For a second, I was more embarrassed than scared, but that passed pretty quickly. Before I could ask what he wanted, he apologized and said he had just been about to knock. I asked who he was looking for. He paused for a second, then asked if I was David or Daryl, something like that. It wasn't my name. I told him no. He simply said, "Okay," and stepped off the porch. I locked the door behind me before leaving, and I watched him walk all the way down the driveway and toward the road before I got into my car. Even then, something about the whole interaction bothered me. My house wasn't somewhere people just casually ended up by accident. The neighborhood was too secluded, too deep in the woods, too quiet. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he really had the wrong house. I picked up my friend, got some food, dropped them off, and went back home. By then, it was around 9 p.m. There was a light snowfall, but the night was otherwise still and calm. I went inside, warmed up, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch for a while. A couple hours passed before I started feeling tired. I got up, turned off the TV, and started heading toward the stairs. But as I passed the front door, I remembered the man from earlier. Just to ease my mind, I looked through the peephole. Nobody was on the porch. Everything looked quiet. Then I noticed something in the driveway. At first, it was hard to make out, so I cracked the door open slightly to get a better look. Footprints. Fresh shoe prints in the snow. They started from the road, came up the driveway, went near my car, and then turned off into the yard where the trees blocked my view. I shut the door immediately. My chest tightened. If that was the same guy from earlier, then he had come back. And if he had come back, then the whole wrong address story meant nothing. I locked the door and started checking the windows, trying to think clearly. The more I replayed that first interaction in my head, the worse it felt. The delay before he answered, the way he stood there, how calm he seemed. Eventually, I called 911. While I was explaining the situation to the operator, I kept hearing something faint, something subtle. Every time I stopped talking to listen, it would stop. I actually started wondering if I was imagining it. Then I heard a violent slam hit the back of a house. It was so sudden and so loud that I almost dropped my phone. I rushed into the hallway. Then it happened again. Another heavy blow. I looked toward the back door and could see movement outside through the glass. Not clearly, just enough to know someone was there. Then came another crash, harder. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They were trying to break in. The operator told me I had two choices: hide somewhere secure or get out now. I grabbed my keys and ran. Running outside was terrifying because I had no idea whether there was only one person at the back of the house or if someone else was waiting near my car. But I didn't have much of a choice. I made it to the driveway, got into my car, and drove off. By the time the police got there, the back door had been beaten open, wet shoe prints tracked through the house, but no one was inside. All I could really give them was a description of the man who had been on my porch earlier. There was no hard proof it was the same person. Even if it was, that wouldn't have been enough. They never found him. And what bothers me most isn't just that someone tried to break in. It's how close the timing was. If I hadn't remembered that guy before going upstairs, if I hadn't checked the peephole, if I had gone to sleep just a little earlier, I might have slept through the first few hits on the door. And if that had happened, I don't know how the night would have ended. But I know it wouldn't have ended well. This happened back in 2019 when I was a sophomore in college. At the time, I babysat a few nights a week to help pay off my car. One of the families I worked for had a 3-year-old boy I watched about once a week. I'd been babysitting for them for about a month. The parents were quiet, polite, and friendly enough, but they kept to themselves. Usually they'd leave around bedtime, so by the time I arrived, the child would already be asleep. My job was simple: just stay in the house, keep an eye on things, make sure he was okay until they got back. That night, I got there around 8 p.m. The parents said hello, told me their son was already asleep in his room, thanked me, and left. Like always, I did a quick walkthrough of the house after they were gone. Then I sat down in the living room and started passing the time on my phone. Less than an hour later, the mother called me. When I answered, she sounded confused. She asked if I had just tried to call her. I told her no. She said she had gotten a call from an unknown number, but when she picked up, nobody said anything. She thought maybe I was calling from a different number, or maybe there'd been some kind of issue. I told her everything was fine in the house. She said okay and hung up. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I checked on the child again, then went back to the living room. About 20 minutes later, I noticed headlights shining through the front windows. At first, I assumed it was a neighbor or someone turning around nearby, but the light stayed there. So I got up and looked through the blinds. There was a dark gray sedan parked out in front of the house by the curb. It looked old and rusty, and the windows were blacked out. Then I noticed a man standing a few feet away from it, near the sidewalk, looking up at the house, just staring. I felt uneasy, but I didn't want to overreact. It wasn't even my house, and I didn't want to confront some random stranger if there was a harmless explanation. So I just kept watching. After about a minute, the man got back into the car, but what bothered me was how he drove away, slowly, like he was still studying the house as he pulled off. I watched the headlights move farther down the road between the trees, and then stop. The lights stayed there for a few seconds, then they shut off, as if he had parked somewhere in the dark and gotten out. I thought about texting the parents, but I didn't want to scare them over something that might turn out to be nothing, so I kept it to myself. I turned the TV on low and stayed in the living room. An hour and a half passed, maybe 2. Nothing happened. At some point, I started drifting into that half-awake state where you're technically conscious, but your mind isn't fully there anymore. My eyes kept getting heavy. I was fighting sleep without really realizing it. Then I heard a soft thump. It didn't fully register at first. Then I heard it again. That woke me up. I stood up, thinking I should check on the child, but as I started walking through the hallway, I heard the sound again and caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned and saw someone at the back door. A man. He was outside, pulling on the handle and looking directly at me. The second he realized I could see him, he started yanking on the handle harder, more aggressively. No hesitation, no pretending. My adrenaline hit instantly. I sprinted upstairs, ran into the kid's room, picked him up, and tried to keep him calm while my own hands were shaking. As I held him, the sounds downstairs got louder, heavier, more violent. It sounded like whoever was down there had stopped trying to open the door quietly and had started trying to tear it apart. I rushed downstairs with the child in my arms. Then I heard it, a cracking sound, plastic, metal, something giving way. I got to the bottom of the stairs and started moving toward the front door, but when I glanced toward the back hallway, the back door was open, and the man was already inside. I only saw him for a moment, casual clothes, dark hair, and a knife in his hand. The moment I saw the blade, he started running at me. I ran for the front door, got outside, reached my car, and started backing out just as he got close enough to reach my window. I drove until I found somewhere safe, then called 911 and the parents. By the time anyone got there, he was gone. And to this day, I still believe he came there for a reason. He knew the parents were out. He showed up late. He forced his way inside with a knife. I don't think he was there to steal something. I think he came for that child. And what made the whole thing even stranger was what happened after. The parents thanked me that night. Then they never spoke to me again. They never hired me back, never followed up, never explained anything. It was like they wanted distance from the whole thing as quickly as possible. Later on, I tried looking into it myself. I didn't find much. The only thing I ever came across was that the mother had previously been married, and her ex-husband looked somewhat similar to the man I saw that night. I can't prove it was him. Maybe it wasn't. But somehow, that almost makes it worse. Because if it wasn't him, then that means someone else knew exactly when that house would be vulnerable. And if it was him, then there was a lot more going on in that family than I was ever meant to know. The scariest part about stories like these isn't just what happened, it's what almost happened. A man hidden in the back seat, waiting for the road to get darker. Footprints in the snow outside a secluded house, leading into the trees. A stranger with a knife forcing his way into a home where a child was sleeping upstairs. No ghosts, no demons, no urban legends, just people. And that's usually worse, because real people don't need supernatural powers to ruin a life. Sometimes all they need is patience. So if you ever get that feeling, that quiet, ugly feeling that something is wrong, don't ignore it. Check the back seat, lock the door, call for help, leave if you have to. Because sometimes fear isn't irrational. Sometimes it's the only reason you make it out. And sometimes, the only difference between surviving a horror story and becoming one is 1 second, one glance, one decision.